we focus a lot on mechanisms that are biological and relate to the brain, so neurobiological mechanisms. I will follow this line, of course, but I also want to introduce another perspective a little bit, that is the psychological. And we will talk about mindset, and I will explain what we mean by mindset, because mindset it's a word that can really mean many things, right? I will make you some examples, and I will guide you through 3 studies that basically look at different responses to food. One will look at the brain activity, attention activity, and another one more behavioral. But we also wanted to look at, okay, what is how does people mindset and your own mindset when you approach food, when you see a picture of food, or when you are about to eat food, influence that response. We start with something that was already mentioned. This is so-called obesogenic environment. It's something that is growing more and more in the last 50 years. So since 1975, this is a little bit a cutoff, but it's hard to really draw a line, of course. Our environment, especially in the Western countries, but not only, is characterized by very accessible food, very cheap. The problem is that it's lowest nutritional values, and it's really, really high in calories. Basically. So this combination doesn't affect only the physical environment. If you look at, for example, where vending machines full of snacks, unhealthy snacks are placed, for example, strategically in hospitals, in schools, but also, so the physical environment has this shape, this form, but also the digital environment, right? If we look at delivery service, food delivery service from grocery to just snack or cooked food, and also social media, right? All this influence of food is really everywhere. And given in this context, is also very important to now contextualize and to see, okay, we are dealing and we are operating in this context. And we look at quite carefully at the literature, so at previous studies, that they basically had 2 conclusions. They look at mostly brain imaging study, but also study that investigated attention for food. And their conclusion were 2. The first was that there was a higher response, no matter in which fancy technique or machine did you use, high response comparing high caloric, palatable, so tasty food comparing to low caloric and maybe less tasty food. And the same effect was enhanced in people with obesity, people with higher BMI compared to people with healthy weight or low BMI. So that was a little bit the conclusion. This type of conclusion is rather logical. You would say, yes, I also know that, of course, kind of. But we wanted to also investigate what is the empirical evidence for this. This is a bit more the theoretical starting point, right? Pizza would elicit a stronger response, higher response, no matter how we measure it. And this effect would be stronger in people with obesity as compared to healthy weight. If we look at the brain pictures a bit, this is a summary. It was a very nice review paper done in the US a few years ago. And it basically maps, this is not one study, but it's basically where many mental process connected to food, but connected to any rewarding stimulus, elicited responses in the brain. And then you can see that basically I want you to focus a bit more on these 2 quadrants, so reactivity and also regulation, which are a bit the two opposite. So you see the color, for example, this number 3, this purple, reddish, yellowish. This number 3 is an area that is very, very much dedicated. This called orbitofrontal cortex, for example, it lights up a lot generally when you present food to the stimulant. And in connection to reward, in connection to, oh, yummy food, that's quite nice to see or to eat, because you can also let participants eat or at least drink something in the sky. On the other hand, areas in the prefrontal cortex are very active, for example, in cognitive control, in self-control with respect to food. And for example, they are really active in people with anorexia nervosa when presented with food, more than in healthy control. So this is a little bit the overview where we started from. But we also review a bit the literature. You don't need to read the titles, but the take-home message is that there is a lot of inconsistency. Some studies, quite many actually, they found results in line with the theory that I just explained before. So pizza would lead to higher response as compared to carrot, for example. Some other study found the opposite. Some other studies, not Swiss study, but they were just neutral study, they found no difference in between. So no difference comparing healthy weight and people with obesity, but also no difference comparing high and low caloric food or your favorite food compared to least favorite food. So there is a lot, and there is a lot of mixing results, a lot of contradiction. And we think that, and not only we think, but there were also reviews saying that this might be due to two different things. One is the psychological mechanism. One is the complexity of the stimulus, because food can elicit, it's a very complex stimulus. Visually, it's really, really complex. And it can elicit very different thoughts. You can shift within the same person between thinking, oh, this is a very nice food, I would like to eat it. But on the other hand, I would like to buy it when I go to the grocery shopping, or I would like to go to the cafeteria and get that muffin, or this is not good for my health, maybe I should look away, or something like that. So it's really, really complex to study. So this aspect might lead to that, but there is also another methodological aspect that is connected to the brain research, fMRI research, which is called reverse inference. Reverse inference meaning that we start wrongly, or some researchers wrongly start from the brain activity, concluding that if I find that area that lights up in that aspect, I conclude that that was the mental process. For example, imagine that we have one participant, Ina, and imagine that Ina we present Ina with her favorite food, which is paella, actually frozen paella, if you want to be very, very precise. If Ina looks at frozen paella, trust me, she will really like it, and some area will light up. For example, the orbitofrontal cortex that I showed you before. I could wrongly conclude that area, orbitofrontal cortex, is the area of reward, because Ina likes it, right? So this type of reverse inference is methodologically wrong. Another example that we all experience today is with smoke and fire, for example, right? If we see basically smoke, which will be our brain activity, we might conclude that is due that smoke means fire, basically, which would be the mental process. And this could be, in some cases, a good conclusion, right? Actually, we don't know what causes the alarm. But of course, smoke can be due to barbecue, can be due to other things, can be due to lighting a cigarette. So this reverse inference is always very, very wrong. And we try to tackle that. I don't want to mean that we managed, but we try to tackle this reverse inferencing using a mindset manipulation. So when I present in the scanner, this is a person laying down in the scanner, a picture of the donut, of course, your mind can wander around, right? And if I present it even for 1 second, 1.5 seconds, your mind can start wondering, oh, I just love it, oh, I want to eat it right now, but this must be so many calories, or this makes me gain weight. If we don't know when we measure that, we don't know what we are measuring, and we might get to the wrong conclusion. And within the same person or between people, there will be many of these conflicting things, each leading to a different response. So we are really not able to say what we are measuring in terms of quality. So we wanted to have this type of mindset manipulation, but it's hard to define it. It's also hard to integrate that. But I will explain with an example. Imagine this is a cheese croquette, but imagine that you like it, right? Imagine, yeah, it's a bit of a mental imagery, but imagine you like it. There are two scenarios. There is what we call the hedonic mindset, this hedonic, so it's basically taste related, and there is the health mindset that we use for our manipulation, that is a bit more caloric and health value related. The same food can be viewed and can be perceived very, very differently while you're preparing a dinner with friends, right? Or while you're enjoying a dinner with friends, or you're outside and you're just enjoying that type of food with friends, or right after a very intense gym sessions, or you go running and you pass by grocery shopping and you say, oh, but look at that food, should I get it or not? Let's see. This is the same food and this is the same person. Right? So it can really elicit a lot of different responses. So we have these three studies. In study 1, we look at the brain activity. In study 2, we look at the eye tracking, the attention for food, but we're using the same type of stimuli. And in study 3, we look at people response, so how much people they would like the food, desire to eat, or actually ate this type of food using a smartphone application. So a bit in real life, because we want to go outside the laboratory. And this is study 1. we had two groups of participants with healthy weight and participants with obesity. We standardized the gender, so we only look at female participants. By the way, these were not students, but were Dutch female, on average 40 years old. That was the average age. And we have stimuli, in this case, pictures of food presented in the scanner. There is a little screen. It's not really a screen, but to make it simple, imagine there is a screen, and then we can present pictures and measure the brain activity while they do that. We also have different categories of pictures. So we have high caloric, low caloric, and also we have favorite and least favorite. These are mine, okay? But each participant have their own, because we had a list. We didn't have any food that exists in the world, but we managed to streamline 90 types of food, and they could tailor their own categories. So for each person, they would have high caloric, palatable, or tasty here, and low caloric, palatable, and unpalatable. On top of it, we also have, you see the same picture, but we also have three different mindsets. And by mindset, we ask participants to judge the pictures. So to compare the last picture that they would view with respect to the previous one, they would appear in a sequence, one after the other. And we ask them, do you think that this is more or less tasty than the previous one? This was the health mindset. Or do you think that this is more or less caloric? Does it contain more or less calorie than the previous one? And we look at the results. So in short, we didn't find significant difference in the brain activity. Significance doesn't mean that there was no difference, but there was no significant difference in comparing the brain activity of healthy weight with respect to particular obesity across all stimuli. We also had more or less, so no significant difference as for taste. The same was for calories. And we found a significant difference only when participants were switching from one mindset to the other. So whether they were judging the taste based on the food, based on the taste, or based on the calorie content, or based on the color. This was a neutral baseline condition that we added because we wanted to better compare the two mindsets. So we added this basically neutral. And in this one, we ask about color. Do you think that this picture contains more or less color than this one? So we only found this task shifting effect. For the rest, there was a little bit of a difference, but no significant difference. We wanted to analyze the data in a different way because we were a little bit puzzled also by that. These results go against the main theory. And we use another analysis. So in the first type of analysis, we look at level. Imagine that level of brain activity elicited by pizza or level of brain activity elicited by curry, which was one of my least favorite food, but again, it is my choice. And in the first analysis, we look at level of activity. In the other analysis, in the second analysis, we look at pattern. So basically, if you look at parts of the brain, so for example, this little part, you can look at pattern of activity. And this pattern can be different from this. And this second type of analysis gives a bit of a more precise, it's a little bit more of a high resolution type of analysis compared to the level. It could be, in other words, that the same stimulus can have a similar level of activity, but different pattern, because this is a bit of a higher resolution type of analysis. And we want to repeat the analysis and to see, okay, what happens as for calorie and taste? Is there really no difference, or can we find it with this higher resolution analysis? And indeed, we found this type of difference. We saw that there was a difference comparing high caloric versus low caloric food, and most favorite versus least favorite food, especially in the occipital part of the brain, so in the visual area, that would be around here. So there are still many areas involved in this brain region, but we found it that. And interesting, that was not this effect was not different comparing high and low BMI people. So people with obesity and people with healthy weight. So that was the thing. And it was also no different comparing mindsets. So this effect of this new analysis that led to a difference in calorie content and taste and palatability was independent of BMI, independent of the mindset. So that's what we could conclude from that the main theory was not replicated because we didn't find any difference in the BMI of people, And in the main analysis, mindset played a role. And we can also say something about calorie content and taste, which are two very important characteristics of food, but using that type of pattern analysis. Now we quickly move to another study. It was the night tracking study. We had the same type of design, two different groups of people. In this time, the mindset manipulation was done by two video clips. I just have a frame here. I don't have time to show you the whole video. I'm from Venice, so in this hedonic one, they were having a lunch in a boat that was also set up by some friends of mine. So you could have dinner in a boat. The boat was good, and there was a young chef cooking a dinner for you. So very nice. And the second one was actually a bit of sport and like Nordic walking or gym class here. I targeted to the sample, so I couldn't have really high intensity sport or frequency. We look at eye movement for when presenting food, so where attention would go, and also reaction time. And we also have a taste test. So we had participants in the lab eating high caloric food, and we want to see whether there was a difference between one mindset or the other. There are people in the lab, they would eat more or less depending on our mindset manipulation that was done. And in conclusion, we again find no significant difference in attention orienting comparing the two BMI group. We didn't find significance as for mindset, unlike the fMRI study. We didn't find also significance results on the attentional part, but we find it on the behavioral part. So participants with obesity were in general slower at responding compared to people with healthy weight, the control. And we also find mixed results as compared to the taste test, because we found an interesting effect in the lab. People are very skeptical about eating. So we had 2 sessions of that, and they eat more in the second session because they need to kind of get used to that. And this is called neophobia, this effect. So eating in a synthetic environment is not really good for participants. And then the more session you do, the more participants would eat. So that's why I put this traffic light a bit in between. And then I want to conclude with the last study that is a bit more ecologically valid, we say. So it's a study in which we investigate how people eat and perceive this food, especially high caloric food, in daily life, right? Without coming to the lab to avoid this neophobia effect or to avoid any sort of synthetic type of environment. We have a 3 weeks study in which we assess using a smartphone app how much people would eat and consume high caloric snacks. It was all people who would snack at least once a day. We included in the inclusion criteria. We assess how much they would like and how much would like to eat or how much they actually ate. We had the second week in which we added a mindset manipulation, and we also have a post measurement in which we again assess. And the mindset manipulation was this time was made by text messages that we would send to participants multiple times a day. So this was a continuous assessment. And the hedonic mindset would be, oh, you really work a lot or you study a lot today, you deserve a break, and you also deserve a snack, a really nice snack. Just one at the end of the day, it's fine. And the have mindset was a bit the opposite. You have a very long, stressful day. Why don't you go for a run, or why don't you take a break? You go outside, you go for a walk in the countryside. And we want to see what this has an effect on desire and consumption. And in line with previous studies, we found basically an effect of time. So people being monitored, they would decrease the number of snacks that they would desire and they would eat. So over time, so just by keep monitoring this, we found this effect of time over three weeks. That effect was not dependent of BMI, of mindset. Actually, our mindset manipulation, again, so this is the second study, didn't work out, and we will have maybe an explanation, maybe afterwards, or maybe you have an explanation for me. And people tend to snack more in the late afternoon. That's a quite common findings, but it was an interesting replication, maybe also for intervention to reduce unhealthy snacking, that people tended to snack more in the afternoon. So to have basically a recap, if we look at here on this type of axis, we have BMI, so people with healthy weight and people with obesity. We have the effect of mindset, and we have the effect of high calorie or taste, depending whether we ask for that or not. But let's say high calorie. So pizza versus vegetables, or lasagna versus vegetables. When we look at the level of brain activity, so general level of activity of these things, we then find an effect of a difference in BMI. We found an effect of mindset. We then find an effect of macro characteristics of food. If we look at pattern of brain activity, we found only an effect of calorie content and palatability, which means whether it was your favorite or least favorite food. When we look at the eye tracking, we didn't find any difference. We didn't manipulate that. We have only high caloric food. That's why there is no icon. So we didn't find any effect of BMI and mindset. And when we look at daily life snacking using the smartphone app, we didn't find any effect of BMI, but we found a mixed effect of mindset. So for some people worked, but for some others didn't. So in conclusion, we didn't find any significant over 3 studies and also more studies in our lab. We didn't find support for the main theory, meaning that high caloric and palatable food would elicit stronger response, and this effect would be highlighted, will be more prominent in people with obesity compared to healthy weight. We couldn't just find if we controlled for the mental state of participant. So it's not as simple. The same for BMI, right? It's not as simple. And I also don't like this idea of categorizing group. So putting label. So just because you have a higher BMI, then you should respond like this compared to the other things. We also think that there is a lot of variability within each group, but also within each person. So it's much more complex. And also it's very hard to manipulate mindset, to manipulate the mental state with which we look at food. And in the future study, we also look into something a bit more tailored, so individually tailored type of assessment, because one size fits all type of manipulation doesn't seem to work. And that was the overview.